What's going on, everybody? C4 here, still under the weather, but it's no time to stop as we're talking about the 2018 draft class. And today, we're going to continue with our positional rankings, and we're going to look at the top 5 linebackers for the upcoming 2018 draft. Now, as you can see, probably at some little pop-up here, I've already done my round 1 rankings for linebackers, which happened at about week 6 of the college football season. We had Tremaine Edmunds of Virginia Tech at number 5, Jerome Baker number 4, TJ Edwards number 3, he returned to school, Cameron Smith from USC at number 2, he returned to school, and Malik Jefferson from Texas at number 1. Now that we have a little bit more clear picture, it's drastically changed. There is 2 guys from that list that made this. Obviously, with 2 of them going back to school, there was going to be some heavy turnover. But ultimately, I really do think that all 5 of these linebackers that I'm going to talk about can make impacts as rookies and could very well be, big-time starters in the NFL down the road. Now, the only reason why I'm doing 5 is I did edge rushers, so a lot of guys will be considered maybe 3-4 outside linebackers, medium 4-3 outside linebacker defense, like all those things. They were covered in the edge rusher, so that's why today we're going with guys that are the more traditional linebackers, guys that can drop back into coverage, as well as some of these guys can definitely get after the quarterback. So if you're looking for some names that I might not bring up, go check out the edge rushing video I did. It was D-line edge rushers, and I probably talked about them there. So without further ado, jumping in at number 5. Oh, how dare we jump in number 5 without doing the honor mentions? We have 2 honorable mentions. Number 1 is Josey Jewell from Iowa. Again, tackle machine, but he really does tick off a lot of boxes, like we'll say Ben Ballway from Clemson. Like, the guy that's measurables aren't that great, but his stats have always been, top of the line in college. Really, really good production, the leader type guys. For some reason, they usually don't get drafted very high, and they don't really catch on in the NFL. I also think of maybe Tyler Matakevich from Temple a couple years ago. He's now on the Pittsburgh Steelers. I don't know off the top of my head, I can't remember. There you go, there's 2 ones. Ben Ballway, Tyler Matakevich. Both these guys, and Josey Jewell kind of falls in that mold, but I definitely think he has a chance of getting drafted higher than those. I think Matakevich went in the 6th or 7th round, and Ballway went undrafted. I think Josey Jewell probably could go between, I don't know if 3rd, but we'll say 4 to 6, somewhere between that range. Definitely be able to contribute as a special teamer, and I definitely think he has upside to start. And number 2 is Tigray Scales from Indiana. Really, really productive type player, and I definitely think that he's a little bit more, he's one of those guys I want to see how he performs at the combine, how well he tests, but his production at Indiana was very, very solid, and I think that if you're looking for a mid-round linebacker that predominantly plays inside, he could be a name to watch. So now, let's jump into the top 5, and at number 5 is going to be Malik Jefferson from Texas. Yes, I had him at number 1 in my original rankings. Now he slipped down all the way to 5. That's a little bit because of his well-roundedness / play, but I think a lot of it more has to do with other names coming on the board than him that had really good seasons. But I still think he could very well end up going in the 1st round. Now my gut kind of is leaning towards he should go in the 2nd round at some point. He's 6'3", 240 pounds on the year. He had 110 tackles, 10 tackles for loss, and 4 sacks. The positives of Malik Jefferson: he's an excellent athlete and very much is sideline to sideline. I think if you want a guy that predominantly can more so live in the other team's backfield, get to the outside, rush the quarterback, Malik Jefferson is your guy. Like, really, I don't want to put him in the box and say he belongs in like a 3-4 scheme, but you see him, like, I think a team, just out of the way that they use their linebackers, I think a team maybe like New England would be a great spot for him. He could be that guy that Bill Belichick just says go, and it's your job to go get the quarterback, kind of like how they use Dante Hightower. When you look at the negatives of Malik Jefferson, his coverage ability is not so hot. Like I said, he's more of a guy that gets downhill in the backfield, and he's sometimes inconsistent play. He'll have a couple big games, couple bad games. Kind of split every time they played a big competition. He either had an outstanding game or he was nowhere to be found. He never called his name. So I think because of the inconsistencies and his lack of coverage, he could be worth a 1st-round pick to the right scheme. Depending on how well he tests, he should test particularly well at the combine. But right now I'm having him at number 5. But if he does blow me away at the combine, he could very well rise up on this list if I decide to do a 3.0 rankings. Going to linebacker number 4, we're going with Leighton Van Der Ich from Boise State, 6'4", 240 pounds on the season. He had 141 tackles, 8.5 tackles for loss, 4 sacks, 3 interceptions. When you look at the positives, excellent instincts, he looks every bit the part of a starting NFL linebacker. 3-down linebacker, can do everything that you want him to do. Not the greatest in coverage, like usually when you're 6'4", you're not going to be, usually see undersized linebackers that are the guys that really, really excel dropping back into coverage. But he's certainly no liability, and he can get after the running backs, he can get after the tight ends just well and just fine. And really good tackling instincts. And he's a good athlete. He's another one of those guys that I think will surprise some people with the numbers that he's able to put up at the combine. But because he's a good athlete on tape, the negatives is that combine. Surprising, when you surprise someone at the combine, it means that there's some stock that could be had. Which means that if he doesn't test particularly well, his stock could be hit a little bit. If he looks a little bit slower, obviously, game speed and combine speed are a little bit different. But, you always want to see your guy test a little bit higher than expectations. And I want to see his strength. He's one of those guys, even though he's 240, he's a big guy. I don't know if he has the immediate strength right now as a day one rookie to be able to get off a lot of blocks in the NFL or enough that it's going to look like his college tape. Which is, for a lot of linebackers, obviously that is something that happens and you grow in the first year or two, is once you get on that NFL strength and conditioning program. You bulk up a little bit, son. You get on that legal juice. Legal Lane Johnson supplements if you do well. But I think Leighton Van Der Ich definitely could be a surprise name that you hear called in the first round. I mean, Philadelphia, hey, he's there. I had him mocked to the Eagles. I was either my first or second mock draft. I think I had him in the 4th round. But from a prospect standpoint, I've always liked him to the Eagles, so I wouldn't be upset if he is the guy we select at 32. Going to linebacker number 3 is going to be Rashon Evans from Alabama, 6'3", 235 pounds. On the season, 74 tackles, 13 tackles for loss, and 6 sacks. When you look at him, I kind of said Malik Jefferson using in a Dont'a Hightower role. Obviously, Dont'a Hightower went to Alabama, and the 3 or 4 games I watched completely of Alabama, Rashon Evans looked like Dont'a Hightower back there. The positives, he's very good at blitzing. He's a great athlete and still has plenty of upside. I don't think he's anywhere near his ceiling yet. Again, because of that, I think he might be one of the linebackers. That's a little bit of a scheme fit. I think he might excel better in a 3-4 than a 4-3. But either way, I think he's pretty much interchangeable. You know what I'm saying? He can play in both schemes, but I think a 3-4 might fit him a little bit better. Because the only negatives, kind of like Malik Jefferson, he's not as bad, but he's average in coverage. It's very rare that you get a complete linebacker, and some of the linebackers we're going to talk at 2 and number 1 are a little bit more in that complete direction. But like I said with Rashon Evans, one of the positives was his upside. I definitely think he has the potential and room to grow into being considered one of the complete linebackers in the NFL, and that's why I definitely think he is very much worthy of a first-round pick. And like I said, linebackers, now that we're talking about more so not the edge guys, this is important for Philadelphia Eagle fans, because I think for Philadelphia, linebacker, if one of really any of these guys are still available at 32, they could definitely be a big-time name for Philadelphia to look at target, because it's linebackers a big need for us. But this is not an Eagles video, neither here nor there. But Rashon Evans at number 3. Going to number 2, it is going to be Tremaine Edmunds from Virginia Tech, 6'5", 250 pounds. On the season, he had 108 tackles, 14 tackles for loss, and 5.5 sacks. Now, he's a guy that has shot up pretty much every expert's draft board. I put a lot of stock into him. Originally, he was my number 5 linebacker. Now he's all the way at number 2. I'm not as high as some of the people are over the number 1 guy, just because I still think there's a project tag with him. And anytime there's a project tag, there's a chance that they'll fail. Whereas the number 1 guy that we're going to talk about, I can't see any way that he fails. That's the only difference. Ultimately, I think Tremaine Edmunds has the most upside out of any linebacker in this year's draft class. When you look at the positives, he's your height, weight, speed, freak athlete. Sideline to sideline, has really, really good mechanics, and he's 20 years old. That's one of the hidden things when Philadelphia drafted Derek Barnett, was that he was so much younger than almost everyone else. Age is massive in the NFL, and when you're 20 and you have the kind of skill set and attributes that Tremaine Edmunds have, that's kind of why some people have had him at number 1, because of the upside. I just can't put him over the number 1 guy, just because the number 1 guy for me might be one of the best linebackers I've ever seen in college over the last 6 years, 5-6 years, something like that. But today we're talking about Tremaine Edmunds, and I think he can go literally anywhere from he could somehow, if he dominates the combine, which he might. I mean, there's some comparisons to Brian Urlacher. I think NFL.com had that. If he puts up insane numbers at the combine, he might be able to go top 10. My gut right now is saying that he'll go between 12. Maybe. You got you got Miami and Oakland and 49ers picking there. I mean, that wouldn't be too much of a reach, but I would say from the 49ers all the way to, you know, early second, depending on how much of a project teams really evaluate this guy being. That's where he'll go. When you look at the negatives, like I said, he's a little bit inconsistent time to times, but again, when you're that young, that's kind of one of the things. It's a growing pain, and he's a project type player. That's the reason why I have him at number 2 and not number 1, because there's a chance if he goes to a team that has a terrible linebacker coach, or goes to a team that's, you know, not preferred scheme or teaches some bad mechanics, he might not be able to live up to his full potential versus a guy that's coming in as a much more finished and polished product that really is just more so plug and play and get ready to see the production. But either way, it's almost a 1A, 1B here for the top linebackers this year's draft class, and whoever gets Tremaine Edmunds is getting a guy that is insanely good. Going to linebacker number 1, it was always going to be Roquan Smith from Georgia, 6'1", 225 pounds. On the season, he had 137 tackles, 14 tackles for loss, and 6.5 sacks. When you look at the positives, he's an elite athlete. He's a sideline-to-sideline linebacker. He's a 3-down linebacker. He's good in coverage. He has leadership qualities. He's everything. He ticks off pretty much every single box that you want to look for a linebacker in today's NFL. I think he's kind of in the mold that, you know, where you have a Tremaine Edmunds, 6'5", 250, or you have Leighton Van Der Ich, 6'4", 240, 245. That's like an old school style of linebacker build. You know, the Ray Lewis, well, maybe Ray Lewis wasn't that tall, but from a weight standpoint, right? But now, people want the thinner guys that can match. It's a passing league nowadays. You want the thinner guys that can cover the running backs off the backfield, can cover the, you know, the wide receivers that are classified as tight ends, like the Evan Ingrams of the world. I think of Roquan Smith is exactly what you want. But that size could definitely be a concern depending on your scheme. He's 6'1", 225, so that's like kind of Ryan Shazier. We're hoping he gets back on the field sooner than later. But that Ryan Shazier, really speedy guy mold. Like, he's not going to be able to run over and square up some of the bigger power backs or some of the bigger guards that are pulling in this league. But his instincts and his rare sideline-to-sideline ability is what makes him truly valuable. And I think the fact that when you're 225, right, and you give up, you know, for some of these guys in the class, 15, 20 pounds, excellent technique can go a long way. And I think that's where he makes the difference versus some of these guys that are bigger and a little bit more power hitters. He is more consistent with his technique, and because of that, that is why I have Roquan Smith at number 1. So there you go, guys. Those are my top 5 linebackers for the 2018 draft class. Nothing crazy, nothing too far off the beaten path of what a lot of rankings would have. Maybe a couple differences here or there, but generally the same type of names because it's really that consistent of a top 5 for this year's linebacking core. And I think if you're in need of a linebacker, you'd be very, very happy with any of these 5 guys. So let me know if you agree or disagree with anyone that I talked about in my list here today. As always, if it's your first time stopping by, don't be afraid to hit that subscribe button. And until next time, it's C4 saying peace out.